Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Louisiana State Senator Bodi White. Bodi's going to talk to us about St. George and its attempt to incorporate as a city so that they can provide a high-quality education for all children in the area. And he's going to tell us that it's happened before, and that's when he was a House representative when Central became a city, and Central is now in the top 5 public schools in the state with a 20 million surplus as a city. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Senator Bodi White.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Buy Insurance. Why? Insurance stands for uninsured or underinsured insurance coverage, and it's the only insurance you will buy that protects you in the event you're involved in an automobile collision and the other party who hit you and is at fault has either no insurance or minimal insurance. Remember, in Louisiana, we only require to get a license and drive that you have at least $10,000 in coverage. So if you have $100,000 in injuries, but they only have $10,000 in coverage, you're out 90 grand, unless you've purchased Insurance. So number one, buy Insurance. You can waive it or select lower limits, but do not do that. So the Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is buy Insurance.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show for the very first time Louisiana Senator Bodi White. Bodi, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Locke. I appreciate it.
Well, tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Locke, I'm a lifelong resident of East Baton Rouge Parish. I've been in the legislature 11 years now. I currently represent Senate District 6, which is it's a big district. I represent parts of 4 parishes, East Baton Rouge.
Did I say 100 mile?
More than 100 miles around it,
Wow.
From Ascension Line up to the top of East Baton Rouge, South St. Helena, a little bit of North Livingston, and Tangipahoa from Independence to the lake.
So it's a big area.
Oh yeah.
A lot of folks.
Hammond, Ponchatoula. It's very diverse. Southeastern's in it, so very diverse district.
And a little bit about your personal life. I think you're married, 3 kids?
Married, 3 kids. Have 1 grandchild.
Good for you. I got 1 on the way.
She's just fixing to make 5. She starts kindergarten Monday, and real excited about that. It'll be the first one of my kids or grandchildren to get to go to Central Community School District, so I'm looking forward to her having a great time.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Give the folks a little bit about your educational background.
Graduated from Southeastern, and now I have part of that university in my district. Went to graduate school at Loyola. From there, worked in East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office, had degrees in criminology.
Deputy, right?
Yeah, worked in detectives for about 5 or 6 years, and really learned this parish a lot during that time. And from there, went to work for ExxonMobil for almost 20 years until I went to the legislature and left and do some, have a private security company, do some work for some contractors and surgery centers and things like that.
And your education is in criminal justice?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit, because you've been in the legislature. First you were in the House, what, from 2003 to 2012?
No, from 2004. It was 8 years,
Got
2
it.
terms.
Okay.
2 terms in the House. And then this is a new district after reapportionment to Senate District 6. And I ran for this seat and won in 13 and took office in, ran 11, took office in 12.
And that is now in the Senate, where I think, what, there's 36 senators?
9.
39, okay.
39.
And I think because of the census, you actually had a larger, you said this new district was created, and you also have, what, 5 reps within your Senate district? Is that
I think
sound
6.
About? Is it?
Yeah, I have 2 in Tangipahoa, and 1 in Livingston, and 3 in East Baton Rouge. That's in my district.
Okay. Well, let's go back when you were in the House, because you know, I know you've been on the front lines, and literally was on the show Frontline that, you know, was in the media here recently. But you've been involved in education reform in Louisiana from the beginning, it seems, in your public service. First as a House rep and helping folks in the central area. Explain to the folks how that went down.
Well, I think just like every other young parent, my wife and I, Robin, when our oldest daughter was 5 years old, we had to make a decision about her schooling. And to be honest, during that times, she's 30 now. There weren't that many options in the north, especially north end of East Baton Rouge Parish, and so it was a tough decision. Well, you know, we were involved then, ended up in private school.
Which cost a chunk of change.
Well, with 3 in private school, even way back then, it cost me probably $20,000 a year.
That's right.
So at some point along middle schools or so, we decided to get back in the public school system, and were able to get them in central schools at that time, still under East Baton Rouge Parish, and tried to work within the system to get people back engaged, and worked for several years. And actually, me and a group of parents just like myself, people that live in that area, were successful in getting people coming back to the public schools, and then along comes another redistricting.
Done by the school board?
Done by the school board.
And what does that mean? What happened?
Well, they redrew the attendance lines, and I think at that time Central was about 7–8% of the students in the system, and they received about 70% of the redistricting. And it just tore the community all apart again, and kids were forced to be bussed out. And at that time, it really, a great deal of people left the north end of the parish around Central. They just kind of threw up their hands. Yeah. So that's when I wasn't going to move. I wasn't going to quit. And I did go look at a house in Livingston, because I live on old family property, been in my family for 100 years. I didn't want to sell my house that my wife and I built, so I looked at it and I said, you know, it's just crazy. And so we got involved and started looking at some school systems around the country, and we looked at Texas and other areas, and we said, you know, if we're going to change, it doesn't seem to work within the system. We've tried to work within the system, and it doesn't seem to work. And at that time, Baker and Zachary was creating their own district. And Zachary used the Texas model to create a community district, but they had a city.
Right.
But their district is a great deal larger than their city. It goes outside of the city. It's not a true city system, so it was a community system, and saw how they did it, and we studied, and we tried it in '01, and
when you say tried to go to the legislature?
Tried to go to the legislature, and Representative Kennard tried it then, and he was a few votes short on the House floor on the constitutional amendment, and so.
And the objection was, you're not a city?
They said we weren't ready to make a taxing district without being either a parish or a city, to have a school district like other states do. So we come back and kind of worked on it for a couple of years and watched Zachary go through their startup. So when I went into the House in '04, my first year, I had the legislation to try to create the district, and got it out of committee and was ready for the House floor. And kind of like before, I was probably had a count of 71, 72, needed 70, and you always need a cushion.
Same problem.
Same problem.
They said, you're not a city, we're not going to adopt this format that Texas uses.
And actually, Mayor Holden and I sat down and talked. And he said, look, if y'all go ahead and make a city, he said, and don't be different, he said, I won't fight it. I won't fight it anymore. I won't have opposition, because he had supported Baker and Zachary's. And I said, okay. So I went and sat down with a group of parents, and I said, this is the deal. If we're going to do this, I think we're going to have to make a city. I know it's a lot. We didn't set out to make a city. Right. We are a community. Central's actually named after the name derived from, there used to be 8 one-room schoolhouses in the north part of the parish, and they all come together and made one school, and they called it Central because they centralized them.
And so the decision was made amongst the parents, let's try and form a city.
Let's try and form a city. So we sit down and done our homework, and it's a lot of work. It's really quite an undertaking to do all of this by a bunch of folks that they're not paid. They're non-political. They're not paid. They don't have the resources, or the attorneys, or the economists, and you have to sit down and make a budget and make sure you can do it, and you have to make promises to your community. That's right. This is what we're going to do.
And so y'all made the decision to make a city. I want us to continue this on how that process played out on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines, Louisiana Senator Bodi White. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Are you thinking about filing a claim or a lawsuit because of injuries or damages or a business loss? then you need to see an attorney. Again, remember, knowledge is power, and you often can see an attorney, at least on the first visit, free. Educate yourself. Figure out what the consequences are of decisions you make. It's very important as to when you file a claim in a lawsuit. For example, in an automobile accident or injury case, you have 1 year from the date of the accident to file the suit. If you do not, your claim is over with. In a business claim, or typically a contractual claim, it can range from 1 year to 10 years. It's very important that you know your rights. So the Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is, if you're contemplating filing a claim or a suit, see an attorney.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Welcome back to Legal Lines, where again I'm very pleased to have on the show our Louisiana Senator Bodi White. We're talking about the effort, frankly, that St. George is attempting right now, and that's to form a new city. Bodi, you were talking about how in the past, within the last 9 years or so, your community in Central decided to try and form a school district, provide for their own educational needs. Wasn't allowed in the legislature. They said you got to have a city. So the parents got together and said, okay, let's try and make a city.
Right.
Tell the folks how that happened.
Well, we got together and we did the petition process. 25% of the registered voters have to sign to bring it to a vote of the entire electorate, all the voters in that proposed area. That's who votes on it. So we went through that process. The first time, I think it took around 4 months to get basically about 5,000 signatures. Was taken to court. The original petition was thrown out. Even though it had a map showing it was contiguous, the word contiguous wasn't in the description.
So a technicality.
A technicality, threw it out. So then we had
Who attacked it? Do you remember?
I think it was someone living in the area. They didn't
Okay.
want it. There was opposition. But anyway, so then we
Had to do it again.
Had to go back and do it again. I think it took 45 days the second time. You had your list.
Some bad people.
Yeah, you had your list. And they were mad.
Yeah.
Power
of the people.
So anyway, we go back and do it. You have a vote, and I think it called the election. I think it passed like 65%, 67%, almost 2 to 1.
Not even close.
No, but I mean, the city wasn't the driving force. It was the schools.
Right.
That was the reason.
The families want, because you and I have talked about
Right.
this. The education is the #1 most important thing you can give a child in this world, and particularly America, because it determines likely the quality of their life for the rest of their life.
Right. Not everyone agrees with that at first, but there's a lot of people that didn't agree with making a city and maybe didn't support it or may have voted against it. But they've seen what it means to make a new city for your community and take your own destiny, where you were in an unincorporated area, didn't have the services, you didn't have much control over the area, or nearly as much control. You only had one councilman in the area, or metro councilman. So they set it up, they privatized it, they used models.
Explain that, because we're talking about their goal was to create a community high quality public education system. They set up a city, and yet you were telling me stuff that blew my mind, that there is no property tax in Central.
No, not for the city. We used most all our taxing availability to rebuild the schools. We had to rebuild all the schools. The newest school in our community was built in 1973, the year I started it in my senior year of high school. It was 30, 40 years old. That was the newest one. The oldest one was 70 years old.
Wow. So
they rebuilt the schools, redone them. They have to add capacity every year because people keep coming with their kids.
Because it is now, the Central School District is within the top 5 best schools in the entire state of Louisiana.
That's right, they test out in the top 5.
Unbelievable. So explain to the folks, you built new buildings, you had to provide teaching, you had to provide, that was the educational world, you had to provide the city services. How did you do the city services?
There's 2 cent sales tax, this general fund offer your sales tax, everything you buy. In the parish, most areas it's 9 cents, 4 go to the state, and then the 5 are local taxes. 2 cents go to each school district. They have a 2 cent sales tax as part of their funding. 2 cents goes to general fund, used for general fund expenditures. Okay. And 1 cent of that 5, there's 5 local, 4 state. The 4 goes to state, 2 cent sales go to schools, 2 to the general fund of the city, which makes 4, and then there's 1 dedicated. I think it's library, pothole, and a few other things, but it's dedicated. But the 2-cent sales tax and franchise fees on cable and stuff, that's what they run the city on. They have no property taxes. They have about a $6 million budget. They have an elected mayor, 5 councilmen, 1 assistant to the mayor, 1 secretary, and everything else is contracted.
Meaning you've hired private companies to provide all the other services?
They hired a big engineering company first, CH2M Hill, because we were kind of in a jam, needed to stand it up, and they've stood up Army bases and all kinds of things. So they're very familiar. And they kept them for several years, but there's a non-profit company that's running services for cities now, and I can't think of the name of it, but that's who they've contracted with, and it's their employees, and they pay them, they have a contract with them to provide these services, cut the grass so many times in the ditches.
So there's competition and there's measurement.
Yeah.
Standards.
They bid it out, and you have to perform to keep your contract.
Or you don't get the contract.
That's right. And about a $6 million budget, and I think after they got out of court, they got challenged again, and it had to go to the First Circuit to finally the First Circuit. You know, most judiciary panels, as I've found over my lifetimes, they usually rule with a vote of the people. Okay, so they ruled that Central was
people power.
Yeah, they're going to be able to incorporate. So we took the city, finally sat down with the parish, did some cooperative endeavors, worked out how things were going to work, and which roads were the city of Central's, which were the parishes, which were the states, and all those kind of things, who would be responsible, and worked all that out. But today, they just had the elections a couple of months ago. After 7 years of operation, 6 years basically, with a $6 million budget, they have a $20 million surplus.
So in 6 years, build school buildings, become a top 5 performing school in the state, and have a $20 million surplus,
right,
without property taxes.
And they have a big surplus in the school system also.
Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So obviously you have a ton of experience with this, having been involved from the very beginning all the way to the very successful end with the Central City and the educational process. And you've been involved in the very beginning, as I understand it, with the St. George effort, which basically is replicating what you've done in Central.
Right. When I ran in 2011, and I campaigned in the southeast part of East Baton Rouge, which is the south part of my Senate district, it was overwhelming how many young people and older people said, do you think we can fix and get confidence back in our school system? And can we do like Central and Zachary and surrounding and try to build a great school system down here again, to where, you know, our grandkids can stay. They don't live in another parish or out of state. And I had young professionals say, look, me and my wife make $140,000 a year. But we pay $50,000 a year now for tuition.
That's right.
I got to make $100 to pay that $50.
That's right.
And I can't upsize my house. I can't put any money in my 401. I'm putting nothing in their college tuition
and
funds.
Employers can't get folks to move here without paying the cost of that to get
people in other parts of the country that have great public school systems, they really don't understand this.
All right, well, we'll continue this on the last segment. This is Locke Meredith with our Louisiana Senator Bodi White. We'll be right back.
It's time now for Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Hello, I'm Locke Meredith with a Legal Lines tip for you. Don't be frightened or wary of our legal system. It's a good system and it's fair. Typically the process is, whether it's a business claim or a personal injury claim or a contractual claim, is that each party presents their evidence that supports their position. Hopefully, if you have reasonable parties, they negotiate and they settle. If you cannot resolve the matter that way, you then file suit. Attorneys become involved, typically. They collect information, exchange it, ultimately negotiate, and hopefully settle it. If you cannot, then the judge or jury, they decide the issue for you. You present your evidence to them at trial, and then they make the decision. Usually it's a very good decision. The system is effective. So my Legal Lines tip from me, Locke Meredith, to you is trust the legal system.
This has been Legal Lines Tips with your host, Locke Meredith.
Welcome back to Legal Lines. Again, I'm very pleased to have on the show Louisiana Senator Bodi White. We're talking about the efforts, frankly, of St. George to create a city and hopefully take control of their children's educational destiny. Bodi, you were talking about the extraordinary achievements of the Central families and folks out there, having one of the top 5 schools in the state, having a $20 million surplus, building new school buildings, all privatized services for the most part. Talk about the problems that have been encountered in comparison by the St. George folks. You've been involved in that from the beginning.
I was, and we started out down the same path in 2012. I had a school bill to create what was known as the Southeast School District, and it was the pie shape from I-10-12 split to the Central line to the Livingston line, and it was all schools and folks within that boundary. It was very easy to follow boundaries. I told them you don't gerrymander, use big boundaries and parish lines where you can, so it'd be very easily defined. And if you're going to do it, just don't go around any people in those areas. Make sure that you stay the course and do the fair thing. So that legislation, I passed the bill to create the district. It's a simple, it's a local bill. It's passed by majority. But to get your state and federal dollars, you have to have a constitutional amendment to tell Bessie and the Department of Education to pay them their state and federal dollars. That's where we had the problem. Got the bill to the House and was a couple of votes short of passing it on the House floor.
Just a couple of votes? 3 or 4.
Okay,
and the same complaint. You're not a city.
The same testimony. We don't want to make a school district with a taxing boundary. We don't want to divide it up without a city.
Okay.
So we come back in 13. I have the same bill, create the same school district, but I didn't tie it to a constitutional amendment. So legally, that school district sits there.
It exists.
It exists.
It was signed by the governor.
It was signed by the governor. But the authority for Betsy and the Department of Education to pay them the state and federal dollars didn't run the bill, the constitutional amendment. I was at the same point, 71 votes. Didn't see getting 70. There wasn't a statewide vote in 13, so it wouldn't have went on the ballot anyway in the fall. So we said we'll wait to 14 and let's see what happens. When we left out of there, they'd been beat on for 2 years and told committee meeting after committee meeting, because it goes before like 6 committee meetings.
You're talking about the parents?
The parents and the folks that were trying to get this done.
Trying to do it through.
So they kind of throw their hands up and said, look, they keep telling us we need to make a city. Do we need to look at that? I said, we didn't come with that mission 2 years ago. We came to get control of the kids and your schools and try to make a better public school system for your area. So they made the decision after session that they were going to look at it, run the numbers, run the budget. And I just sat down with them, and I knew pretty much after dealing with this what the answers would be, that with all the properties and valuable properties and taxes in that area, that they would have money that they needed to share with the other parish that with Baton Rouge, and pay for things that they had been paying for out of their column of taxes.
And all those issues were worked out, as I recall, for the most part, but they still said, you got to form a city. Even though, Yeah, and the school stuff, I worked all that out, the legacy costs, the retirement costs, and all that. Yeah, we took all of our costs associated, but this is the city stuff. Right.
So they just made a decision to try to form a city and go back to the legislature after they incorporated.
And so, of course, there's been opposition vocalized by the mayor and a local group of folks. There's been lawsuits filed or threatened to be filed, annexations of property, large tracts of land in the area in an attempt to possibly have the petition declared improper or invalid. I believe the State Attorney General Caldwell has indicated it should not.
That's what I read. He said it shouldn't have an effect. Obviously, those pieces of property weren't in the city of Baton Rouge when they started, and they drew the lines, and it was contiguous. So I guess I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit. We had to go through 2 years of court when we incorporated, but the folks down there haven't backed up. They haven't thrown in the towel. They tell me they're still going forward. They're still collecting signatures.
And bring folks up to date. So for your central adventure, you know, it was a smaller group of folks. But for St. George, I think it's over 100,000, maybe 117,000
Yeah, we were like,
folks.
Central was like 25, 27,000. They're
Okay.
like 105, 107,000 down here. It's more folks, it really is.
But they need 25% of registered voters, which, from what I read this week, they have, what, 17,500 signatures.
Yeah, the number's going to be somewhere around 17, 18,000. I told them my advice was to get another 1,000 or two, because you're going to have some people signed it twice in different places. You're going to have some people in the city of Baton Rouge might have walked up and signed it, or some people in Ascension may have signed it. So you're going to have some signatures that are bad.
So you need a cushion.
You need a cushion.
Okay.
And that was my advice. And there's after several bills failed in the legislature to try to put a time limit in different ways to stop them from doing
That's
it. There was 3 pieces of legislation filed this year to try to stop them, or to keep them from being able to annex. They would have stopped the process. But I think as long as you have a group of people, and as many as 20,000 people that are willing to step up and sign a petition to say we need to at least look at this and vote on it, I think the courts eventually have to look at that very strong. And once you have a vote of an area of 100 to 110,000 people, and should it prevail, if it fails, it fails.
Right.
It's over. But if it passes and there's challenges, I think eventually a panel of judges at whatever level, if it doesn't go through at the district, if it fails, it's going to be appealed. Right. At the appellate or the Supreme Court, I mean, they have to look at that very strong. It's part of the system. I mean, if these folks broke the law, if they didn't follow the laws of the Larson Act that tells you how to incorporate an unincorporated area, I understand that. But I think on some of the technicalities, at some point a panel of judges have to look at it and think a long time. Do we tell these people you can't follow the law and do this anymore in the state of Louisiana?
And the election, if they meet that 25% threshold, a vote is called, election is held, and 50% plus one of the registered voters, if they vote for a new city will be formed ultimately, unless some litigation slows it down.
Right.
And the other beautiful thing is, the reason I brought up the smaller size of Central is there is a model in Georgia with the same population size where the success occurred, and the same success at Central.
Yeah, it's very similar, 110, 120,000 people.
All right. Bodi, thank you so much for coming in
Thanks
and
for inviting
discussing this with us. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines, and our Louisiana Senator Bodi White. Thank you for being with us.